nearly half a century, British farming wasn't run by elected British politicians. Good Lord, no. Now, that was all done in Brussels under the Common Agricultural Policy. Well, now we've left the European Union, we're in charge of our own agricultural policy, much more indeed than we are in terms of its cousin fisheries. And that is in a way why you're seeing protests, because what they're doing in Dover and what they've been doing in Wales this week, they can have a direct effect on people who are making the laws and the rules by which farming is being governed. Now today, there's a big National Farmers Union conference taking place after a week of these protests, taking place in Birmingham. And for the first time since 2008, a Prime Minister has gone along to this conference. That's how worried he is, not just about the protests, but about the polling that was out last week, saying that of the 100 most rural seats, of which the Conservatives currently hold 96, they could lose up to 50 of them to the Labour Party. That is why Rishi Sunak was there. Let's have a listen to what he had to say.
Unlike the Labour Party, we will never introduce mandatory requirements to put a percentage of your land into schemes. Nor will we introduce broad-ranging blanket rules like top-down 20-mile-an-hour mandates. With us, you'll have more choice, not less. You can trust us, because I know how important my neighbours, our farmers, all of you truly are. You help support millions of jobs, add billions to our economy, shape the landscape, but most of all, you produce the food we need. Food that is some of the best and highest quality anywhere in the world. And that's why I say to all of you and to Britain's farmers, just as I did in my very first speech in Parliament, I've got your back.
Classic Rishi Sunak. Tell the audience what they want to hear. Tell the audience we're on your side, we're Conservatives, and forget about the track record. Well, let's have a start, shall we? We would never tell you how you should manage your land. Good Lord, no. Let's go back 2 years to the Conservative Party conference and Boris Johnson.
We are going to rewild parts of the country and consecrate a total of 30% to nature. We're planting tens of millions of trees. Otters are returning to rivers from which they've been absent for decades. Beavers that have not been seen on some rivers since Tudor times, massacred for their pelts and now back. And if that isn't conservatism, my friends, I don't know what is. Build back beaver, I say.
Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. There he was saying he wanted to rewild 30% of the farmland in the country. Build back beaver, God help us. And, of course, says Rishi, we would never as Conservatives, no, never, impose 20-mile-per-hour blanket measures inside built-up areas. Really? Really? Are you telling the truth, Prime Minister? Have you forgotten about Cornwall? Yes, the unitary authority in Cornwall, Conservative run, have just introduced in the last few months 20-mile-an-hour limit zones across the entire county. Folks, I don't believe a bloomin' word this bloke says. It's all spin. It's all telling people what he thinks they want to hear. But I wonder how it's gone down with the National Farmers Union, and I'm joined now by Jack Carson, GBNews' reporter. Jack, as you can see, he's doing his best to come along and talk to an audience. And yes, subsidy now does come from the British government, not from Brussels. Has he convinced them?
Well, really interesting topic, of course, Nigel. Of course, he made some big commitments in the room today, didn't he, in terms of new grant funding, in terms of trying to meet food security, which is particularly a big issue for many of the farmers here at the National Farmers Union conference. Making those commitments in the room today, trying to get people on side. A lot of the farmers I've spoken to, of course, they realise he wants their votes, doesn't he? He's looking for, of course, their support as we head into the inevitable general election over the next 12 months. But let's get some more analysis, shall we, of how exactly that speech went down today with Andrew Meredith, who's the editor of Farmers Weekly. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. How do you feel Sunak's speech went down today with farmers in the room?
I think what most people were saying to me is that he basically met minimum expectations. He came with something to say, he had some commitments to make, he tried to emote and show that he understood what farmers were going through. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of farmers out there that are feeling like their livelihoods are under threat, and I'm not sure that he assuaged those concerns.
Of course, he did make some big funding commitments. There was some opposition in the room that this is just old money, rebranded, rehashed into something new. So what more does he need to commit to get these people on side?
Look, in England you have that 2.4 billion, which has been a manifesto commitment since 2019 to spend on farming and the environment. So there is no money beyond that being committed today. That is just new ways to spend that same budget. So if Rishi had really wanted to make an impact today, he could have committed that in the manifesto he would, as nearly every farming and environmental lobby group are asking, he could have committed to increasing that budget. Some are asking for 4 billion, some are asking for more. And look, farmers understand as well as anybody that everybody's asking for more right now. But the cost of the green transition is going to be enormous, and it is not credible at 2.4 billion that they are going to have enough spending power to meet their targets, I don't think.
Of course, we've been seeing the protests, haven't we, on the continent, in France, in Germany, we're all recently today in Poland and Greece. We've already seen them at the port of Dover. How concerned are you? Are you concerned do you think that these are going to develop into something more serious here in the UK?
I think you've got to think about farming policy now in devolved terms, because every nation is different. It's a devolved issue, food and farming policy. So I would say the Welsh are the most angry and most upset with the direction their government is going in. So there's more likely to be tractors on the streets of Cardiff than there is on London. But across the UK, I don't think there has been a time in a long time where farmers have felt so uncertain about their future. I think farmers like my friends Nick and Caris Grayson, tenant farmers, they are asking themselves whether they will have a business to hand on to their boys in the way that they inherited a business from Nick's family. And they are just symptomatic of farmers right across the UK right now.
Yeah, and what you mentioned there is of course, this Welsh sustainable farming scheme. That is, of course, the way of giving up land, essentially, for more sustainable projects. And with Wales, it is minimum entry requirements. But to be able to get that funding, it's minimum requirements of giving up land for those projects. And that's where the anger comes from. In fact, Minette Batters today, in her speech, said that there could be up to 5,500 job losses, hundreds of millions of pounds lost from farming in Wales if this scheme was to go ahead.
That's exactly right, and farmers in Wales are more reliant on government funding on average than farmers in England, and yet the government in Wales seems to be pursuing a higher threshold in future for farmers to meet the criteria whereby they are eligible for those funds. So farmers there are very cross. They say they are the cornerstone of the rural economy. If they are going to crumble, then all of the farming and rural goods and services, the businesses that surround them, they will crumble too. So this is an attack not just on farmers, but on the rural economy. And the farming unions there and the protesters there, those nascent protest organisations, they really want to see a relaxation on that commitment, that requirement in the consultation at the moment for farmers to have 10% of their land in trees and 10% of their land in habitat. Environmentalists say, of course, that if the government is going to spend money, then they need to see a return for it. So there is a real live debate happening at the moment about how that money should be spent.
All right, Andrew, thank you so much for joining us this evening to give us some of that rundown of what has gone on, of course, here in Birmingham at the National Farmers Union conference. Pretty much, I'd say, Nigel, to sum up, the jury's still out very much on who these farmers trust more, of course, to bring back British farming heading towards that general election.
Jack Carson, thank you very much indeed. And I have to say, I thought Andrew Meredith there from Farmers Weekly was, how can I put it, underwhelmed by the Prime Minister's performance today.